Okay, we're ready to go.
Ready? Our meeting will come to order. This is Erda City Council held on Thursday, June 9th, 2022 at 7 p.m. We're in the Tooele County Auditorium located at 47 South Main Street, Tooele, Utah. This meeting is on Google Meet, the link that was sent in the notice, and also streaming on YouTube. We'll go ahead and start with the roll call. Scott Gervais.
Here.
Craig Smith.
Here.
Jess Bird is here. Cale Martin.
Here.
And Terry Miner.
Here.
We are all present. Cale, could you lead our pledge tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open the meeting to public comment. Is there anybody online that has a hand raised or anything?
Not at this time.
Just out of curiosity, how many people are online?
We have 3 people online right now.
Seeing no public comment, I move we close the public
I
comment.
second.
Been moved and seconded that we close public comment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. Chair moves that we approve meeting minutes from June 2nd.
I had some modifications, so I'll second that with the amendments.
Okay. Okay, been moved and seconded that we approve minutes from June 2nd as corrected by Craig. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Sheriff Warner. Oh no, sorry, we've got a request for annexation into Erda.
But the sheriff looked like he was,
We will
Yeah.
swap
looked like he
things
needed to
around.
be,
I'm good, whatever.
You're already there.
Let's be respectful of your time, thank you.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be here tonight. Glad I was able to make it personally. Here's the very brief synopsis of some of the activity in Erda over the last month.
good.
Had 80 calls, wrote 31 tickets. And I'm not on there. We didn't identify you. But as you can see, the biggest source of heartburn is the typical ones on the most significant incidents. And, you know, we had 5 arrests out of that home in the last month. And
Last month, I think it was like 4. Wasn't it?
yeah, it's a challenging element of your city. And
So 5 of 6 were arrests were at the boys' home, so we had another arrest.
well, let's see. No, it was 4, and so there was 2 arrests that weren't associated with that. And that can be, we can drill down if you'd like to know specifically what them other arrests were. I can start calculating it.
It's kind of shocking.
Yeah, no, it is, and you know, and we've worked with the owner as well as juvenile justice to see what we can do, and we're just that's, I guess, our community's contribution to trying to correct some challenged juveniles, and that's having a part of the community. And, you know, there's others throughout the state. I got a call from the director of juvenile justice just this past weekend about a juvenile in Ogden that they thought had some ties out here. So we were trying to track that down, and he was a very challenging one in the Ogden area. And so I don't think it's unique to us. I think it's somewhat par for the course for the nature of the challenged young boys they house. But anyway, I don't want to get hooked on that too long. Do you guys have any questions for me? And we can modify these however you'd like. We can track whatever you guys would like to see, and if you would like a more extensive report, we can. There's quite a bit of capability within our software to produce whatever stats you want to see. So just let me know what you need, and we'll cater it to whatever you guys desire.
Just out of curiosity, I'm assuming these citations are traffic citations, or the vast majority of them?
Vast majority. There could be some misdemeanor citations. You could have an alcohol ticket in and amongst them citations or something to that
Are
effect.
you including public data from State Highway Patrol as well, or is this just?
This is my deputies. Now, yeah, so it wouldn't capture the tickets written on
We've
this.
probably got double or triple this in the citation.
Yeah, well, yeah, with the stops that highway is making through, State Road 36, they would have quite a bit of activity in that area, and even some of ours, quite frankly, could easily be on 36 as well. So we try to let them handle it, but you don't let a egregious violation drive past you if you don't have to. So, any questions for me?
What roads are the biggest, are where most people are speeding? Is it Erda Way and Drew Bay?
By and large. Yeah, Drewby especially. That's a never-ending fishing hole because it's downhill. I don't think there's one of us that haven't looked down at our speedometer and realized we're going a bit faster than what you should be.
Yeah.
And with the changing speed limit, there's sections of it that are 45, sections of it that are 35. So, because just south of or north of Erda Way, if you're heading north, it drops to 35, and so you've got a kind of a on again, off again for 35 versus 45 mile an hour, and so it is a easy road to write tickets on,
I think we don't mind when you write tickets on those roads.
yeah. Well, we like to be reasonable in it, but yeah, and typically if they're getting a ticket, it was pretty significantly over the speed limit.
Do you think lowering those speed limits would help at all, or do you think people are gonna go, they're just gonna keep?
I don't. Typically, if we were to have the roads department come in and do a traffic study, what they do is they set up a monitor and recording speeds, and typically what they're going to recommend is you set it at 85% of. You set it at what 85% of the traffic was going, because the roads, somewhat, depending on how they're engineered, how wide they are, and how the lines are even painted, can have impact on how fast people drive down them or drive on them. And so if you have an open road like that, like if you were to lower it to 25, I think we'd just be writing tickets for 20 over instead of 10 over, and I don't think it would change the behavior much at all. But enforcement does. I mean, if you target it for if you hammer it for a day, you'll change behaviors for another day or two, but people will get back to speeding. So, anything else?
Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll go back to request for annexation in the Erda. I'm not quite sure. You taking the lead on this, Craig? I'm not sure what this
I
means.
guess so. We've had owners of four different property owners give us intents to annex into Erda City. I thought maybe one of them was going to be here today. We're moving forward with an annexation policy. John has written one up. The Planning Commission has looked at it briefly. They've given us recommendations on a map. I will have that populated and back to them. I know it's for them, so they can recommend a policy to us. And then, once we have that in place, then we can accept an application, annexation. That's what's happening. We've had the requests to come into our city. It's the property on the north side. It would actually square up our city really well on the north end down to 36. So we're
Be residential and commercial type areas.
currently is all commercial industrial use. Some of it, a lot of it's zoned commercial right now. There's no residential on it. In the future, it could be residential.
Awesome.
Okay, is that all you have on that?
Unless you got any questions.
I think we just keep working with John to get that plan approved and proceed.
Right.
The annexation plan.
I drafted some.
Yeah, John has drafted it, so.
Erda City Code and fee schedule discussion and adoption. So most of our work meeting just ended just now, was all on this topic. So we're gonna try to adopt that tonight?
Can we do it that quick? We can't.
No. We need an ordinance.
Do you need an ordinance written to adopt the code?
Right.
Okay,
And there's some fine tunings I have to make to it.
so we've got just the discussion portion. Anybody?
But we had that, all of that discussion in the previous meeting, so.
Yeah, I move, we put this forward, have an ordinance made and
I'm gonna hammer on the curfew thing again. I don't think Erda should be having any laws that discriminate on age, gender, race, or creed. And this one definitely discriminates on age. And this is an important one for me, so I will be voting no.
You've already voted on it.
Yeah, we,
Trying to bring it back up, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm gonna vote no on the ordinance to adopt.
oh, I see. So tell me your real thoughts about the curfew. Why you don't think we ought to be able to?
It's a horrible pattern for any government entity to be taking on, and that is isolating a group of people and then applying or allowing fewer rights to that group of people based on any bit of information that they have no control over. And that's age, gender, race, and creed, right? And so that's what this curfew law is for me. It's targeting a certain age range, and you're saying you are dangerous because you're this age. And then you're applying certain restrictions on it. And I think it's good policy to have laws that punish and enforce against actual harms that are committed against other people. And a curfew law is punishing someone who may be
Not doing anything
completely
wrong.
minding their P's and Q's, not harming another person. And that's why it's a bad law. It's gotta go away, in my mind. I do, Craig made a good point that it does give a tool to the sheriff, especially when it comes to the boys' home. And I would be happy to look at this in depth with you guys and try and draft something that kind of crosses those, covers those bases for the boys' home and facilities like that might end up in Erda. But just a blanket curfew law, that's a big no for me.
What if we had a curfew law that didn't have an age discrimination in it? So that like, in Ochre Point, for example, there's gonna be some parks. What if we had a curfew there that people can't just be hanging around there after midnight? Regardless of age.
I think that's a good
You have
idea.
something to say, Sheriff?
Let the sheriff talk on it.
If you guys are comfortable asking me, I don't mind.
Yeah,
Please,
absolutely.
I
Sheriff,
hate to
thank
insert
you.
myself in the discussion.
We're asking you to.
But,
we're going to get drug in.
I do like curfew laws. You know, I've worked in it for, well, Twila City, had a fairly convoluted one. It was very difficult to enforce because they had this certain age kids could be out till this late, and this certain age of kids could be out till this late. And they even simplified it after years of banging our heads against the wall of how to enforce it. So they went with a 17 below, got to be home by midnight unless you're going to or from work, or you're, without your parents. And I think rather than view it as a method of enforcement or control, it also gives us reason to check on someone's safety. And we don't necessarily have to have that, but if teenagers walk around down the road, should they be out at 1 a.m.? Are they a runaway? Do mom and dad know where they are? And so if they, you'd be surprised at actually how few of curfew laws or citations get issued. More often than not, it's a phone call to a parent to say, hey, are you aware that your kids, where they're at? Sometimes they have no idea. Sometimes in the case of, we got the home, but broader than that, it also helps us to you can sometimes address a runaway before the parent even knows they're a runaway. If we see them out and about, you can call a parent and say, no, I had no idea. And we can deliver them home before the parent woke up the next morning and realized they weren't in the bed. And so there's more to it. It's really as much of a safety issue as it is a enforce someone, to make someone out to be a criminal because of their age. And you can go, if as far as age violations, there's plenty of laws that are addressed that are strictly to age. And most of them that we would enforce are at the state level, like when should you be able to drink, smoke,
I'm not in favor of those laws either.
And I think that's
Be free.
and I think that's but you've got to do what's best for your community. We don't feel strongly one way or the other, but I will say it is a tool that we would be able to use within your city limits to, yes, it could be used to help suppress some crime, but it also can be used to help in securing some safety that we may not otherwise. Because if we don't have a lot of reason to stop on them, or if you pull over and they're doing nothing illegal and they take off running, we don't necessarily have a good reason to chase. And, of course, we can shake anybody down if we have reason to believe they're in the commission or recently committed a crime. So we still have that capability, but we do like the ability to stop, check on kids, see what they're up to. And I'm also a fan of putting a closing time on your parks. Otherwise, you will get people having parties all night long in your parks. And the people that live near it will complain.
I think
Late night drug deals.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, Tool even had a siren. The old siren would go off at 10 o'clock at night. If you were a young kid, is that right?
I don't-
You better be.
But again, you guys got to decide, as a council, what's best for your community. That's what you're charged with. And we support whatever you decide.
So do you think a good idea would be have the curfew, but have exceptions for, that's what I'm worried about is you get a kid who was working late, he's going home, he decides, you know what, I'm really hungry, I'm gonna grab a donut from the gas station. And then he gets busted for curfew. I don't think that probably ever happens, but in the case it does, I don't like this kid, he's done stuff before.
Yeah.
Would exceptions be a good thing to put on there?
Oh, yeah. To or from work should always be an exception, because still being a bit of a farming community, some of you might have kids out changing water at any time of day. And you would never want them to be in violation of the law. So you'd have to have some exceptions. And I'm supportive of them exceptions.
Exceptions in the Tooele County Code as is. There's age and that's it.
Yeah. And we certainly don't, like I said, there's actually very few. It's a reason to contact and have that interaction and see what's going on.
But doesn't the code currently, like the one we are talking about, doesn't that specify that it's on public property.
Right.
So for example, when my teenager is baling hay at 2 AM, he's on private property.
But
When
he's
you,
gotta-
when you
he's
stop
gotta-
at
He's gotta
Wendy's,
get there and you might have to stop.
Yeah,
well,
Right.
not if he's in a vehicle, right? You don't,
Well, you could technically, if they're out on a public road, yes, you can make the stop, but I don't know how you,
how you would know.
we don't write tickets we don't write curfew tickets on someone driving down the road. But we don't say, oh, that guy looks 16, pull him over. Or,
Hell's example, you could always stop, because you're on private property, you stop at Wendy's on your way home at 2 AM to get something to eat, you're on private property, not public property, and so you're not subject to this curfew, right?
we wouldn't be going onto private property to enforce a curfew. Now, if Macy's complained about a bunch of kids hanging out in their parking lot, we'd go ahead, yes. You know, which Macy's isn't your problem, but if the smokehouse or whatever said, hey, we're getting kids congregating out, then that one's as much of a trespass as anything.
Trespass, loitering, nuisance. My point is, there are other laws that address harms. Curfew or a teenager being out doesn't necessarily harm anybody. I just don't think it's a good law to have.
I don't know, I look at it, we have all kinds of laws, age, and for good reason. You can't drive until you're 16. And you can't drive after dark with friends in your car for even longer. There's a reason those are put in place. The sheriff has mentioned that maybe you just have one set age, 17 and under, and one set time frame from midnight to 5. I could support that and not having split groups and split times. It actually makes it simpler, and 10:30, yeah, I would be happy to go with under 17 from midnight to 5. I'd be happy to put exemptions of, traveling to and from work. Talked to a lot of police officers about this. One of them who actually works in Salt Lake, but says, when I work the afternoon graveyard shift, I use this law 4 or 5 times a shift. He says, in years, I've never written a ticket, not one. He says, but I use the law 4 or 5 times every shift between 10 o'clock, between midnight and 2 o'clock. He says, it gets used a lot, an awful lot.
So he would probably just stop and say, hey, don't you guys need to be home, or something like
Yeah.
that, rather than arresting them.
Yeah, it's not
That's
arrest
the
or
officer's
harass.
discretion, and I have no doubt that Sheriff Weimer here would do the right thing every time. But not every deputy, now and in the future.
And honestly, that's a fair argument. Absolutely.
It's the principle of the thing. You're isolating a group of humanity and saying, you are dangerous simply because you are this age.
I don't know if they're saying dangerous. They might be saying you need to be
14-year-olds
protected.
drive then, you're limiting them, because you're saying they're dangerous to drive.
So this one officer.
You're saying they're dangerous to exist outside of their 4 walls of their home.
No, we're saying they need protection. This one officer who said he uses it 4 or 5 times a day feels much like Jess personally. He thinks it's infringement on the rights. He says, but as an officer, it's an invaluable tool. He says, so if I was trying to make policy, it would be in there, even though it goes against pretty much everything he stands for, which is an interesting dilemma. But he says, yeah, personally, I hate those kinds of laws. As an officer, they're invaluable to me.
Do we need to tell John to change that to say any age, or 17 and whatever, midnight to 5,
I think
Thanks,
that's,
Sheriff.
thanks, Sheriff.
and parks?
Uh,
'Cause he's
Parks
still
that
working
won't be
on
a
that.
part of curfew law, that'll be its own ordinance, I would guess.
Like I say, I could support the getting rid of the 13 and under at 10:30. First of all, that's probably a little bit unreasonable. A lot of kids will be at the neighbor's house watching a movie and come home after 10:30. Just clean it up, make it 17 and under from midnight to 5. Put an exemption of traveling
To and from work.
to and from work.
You got that, John? We got, no? You okay with that, Scott?
Yeah, I am, but I'm also wondering what Jess thinks about that.
What's the farthest we could take this to get your vote?
He doesn't want any of it.
I know you don't want any of it, but where's a middle ground you could fall? Is there a middle ground where you could fall?
The problem I have with it is how much discretion the officer has. This is a Class B misdemeanor.
Yeah. You could make it a practice.
Think we can make it an action?
What does that mean?
A 15-year-old boy or girl, they're on the fence, you know, they're lost in life, they don't know what they're doing, but they're out past midnight, trying to figure things out. Self-discovery. His first encounter, or her first encounter with law enforcement, it's gonna be a bad one. That kid was not hurting anybody, didn't necessarily have any intent to hurt anybody, and yet we're putting them face to face with an officer. Because they existed. They did nothing else except for draw breath outside their home. And it's just a bad precedent, bad pattern, a bad law in general. It's the principle of the thing. If we can single this group of people out based on their age, why can't we go a little bit further next time? You know what I'm saying? Because we've already crossed that bridge. So I'm against it in principle. I'm not against an officer stopping at anyone walking down the street at 1 o'clock and saying, "Hey, what's going on? Are you okay?" It's what follows, what could potentially escalate and follow behind that I have a problem.
So could we change this to an infraction
I'll take
rather
anything
than a
you give me.
misdemeanor?
I don't wanna isolate people based on age, race, creed, or gender.
Because in order for an officer to stop someone, technically, they have to be violating some law,
Probable cause.
right? They have to have probable cause, right? Reasonable suspicion.
Force a stop, we have to have reasonable suspicion.
Okay.
To turn on the lights behind you, we have to have reasonable suspicion that you,
Broke the law.
I hate to say, yeah, broke the law.
Yeah.
You know, which it can be a very minimal law, like technically a license plate light.
Yeah.
It can be something as petty as
I've had
that.
that used against me.
To step up your law abidance there, Chairman.
Makes
Um,
light.
But,
Not a chance.
but there's nothing, so if someone's walking down the road, if we don't have any reasonable suspicion they're doing anything wrong, it would have to be a friendly encounter, which would,
And then if they run, you can't do anything.
you know, I guess you could, yeah, we wouldn't want to chase that because, you know, they quickly they just decided to go for a jog suddenly when we pulled up. You know, I guess that could raise the suspicion to where we could pursue it, but the reason for the initial contact could be brought to question. But we can have friendly encounters. We can pull up and just say, "How you doing?" But if we do anything to make them feel like they're not free to go, like if I pull up and turn on my overheads, that is technically detaining them, because most people feel like if I'm lighting them up, I'm now detaining them. So it would.
Innocent person in Erda. That's their
Well,
probable cause.
you know, and
And
Uh,
age is
and I-
not a probable cause for me.
and I don't know that that's necessarily flawed in thought, you know, but I do think it's important to point out that there's a little bit difference of a 17-year-old child is what they're typically referred to in the code book, and an 18-year-old adult. You know, and once you hit that magic number of 18, yeah, we shouldn't be discussing curfew, and we don't. That's just not applicable anymore. But when you're talking about children, I would say you'd probably have some parents that if we saw their kid out after midnight or 1 o'clock, they'd want us to check on them. They'd want us to
Detain.
quite, yeah, I think many would, because they don't even know their kid's out. And they don't know what their kid's out doing.
If I had a 15-year-old daughter out with a 16-year-old boy, I'd want to know.
Well, and I will say this.
That's from experience.
If you have a neighborhood, or if you have a street experiencing vandalism, or burglaries, garage burglaries, there's a real good chance that suspect lives right there, within that neighborhood. And this is just one of the, you'd love to think it's the turds from the Salt Lake area driving out here to burglarize. No, it's your neighbor that knows you often leave your garage open. So, yeah, I'm gonna go get me a set of tools. See what High and Mike's will give me for them. And I'm not saying all of our kids are that way, but some of them must be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any issues. So anyway, Ed, like I said, this is strictly your guys' deal. We're happy to do whatever you guys pass, and we'll enforce it accordingly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So let me ask you this. So suppose we have this young teenager that's on the fence, and is out trying to sort out where they're going in their life, and they hear all of these reports about suicide, and they're wondering if that's their future. Wouldn't you want a sheriff's deputy going by to roll down the window and say, "Where are you headed? Are you headed somewhere? Should you be home at night? Do your parents know you're here?" It seems to me there's maybe as much or more opportunity to intervene in bad direction as there is to push someone in a bad direction. So
I'm
what
not
if,
gonna argue with any of that. It's just that initial assumption, that's what I can't get over.
I like it. It's a great tool for parents. You need to be home by midnight because
That's some
curfew-
parents' rules,
well,
and some parents are enforcing that rule for good reason.
yeah, but it's just.
My
it
rule
can
might be 9:30, I don't know,
Well,
you wait till Abby gets to be
It's-
16.
it's not our job, it's not our job to say what
I'm
that
just
is.
saying it helps a parent take some of the heat off of themselves as a teenager saying you're just being unreasonable. That parent can say, it's not me that's being unreasonable, it's just the law. You need to be in. As modifying it, I could accept it that way.
I like the modification, but what about if you agree to support the code with the curfew modified, but we all agree to keep,
I need some more exceptions.
we all agree to keep discussing it. And working through how it looks, how it feels to the public, what we hear has happened with people.
So number one, it's gotta get reduced to an infraction.
I don't see any problem with that at all.
I would agree. Can we make an exemption with permission by parents? Hey, do you know your kid's out here? Yeah. He has my
Kid
permission.
just got his driver's license, mom and dad are sick, can you run to Walgreens? Which, thinking Walgreens in Twilla closes at 10 to 11 o'clock here, but say one day we get a 24-hour Walgreens or Walmart. There's gotta be some reasonable exceptions.
Parental consent, reasonable exception, put it in.
So we do parental consent. You call the parents You reach a parent, they say it's okay, you do nothing? They don't get to ride in the police car?
You know, does that put you in a crappy situation?
The only situation of places is in is, sometimes mom and dad are asleep. They'll
Yeah.
answer their phone.
Yeah.
And so then we don't know what to do with the kid. And we're gonna get cussed out if he did go ahead and head up and, do some, take his own life, whatever. Any number of things could go south because we said, all right, you're free to go, Because
Absolutely.
that's where it would get dicey is, okay, we can't get parental consent or confirmation of it. What do we do with the kid now? And so, but I don't think it's something that, we can't work with the best we can. It's just, that's what we're going to be plagued with is what happens when mom and dad do not answer the
Pick up.
phone or the phone number provided is not the
Is not the right one.
is not the correct number. There's a 101 scenarios. And typically Murphy's Law says we're gonna be dealing.
So what if we put some substance to this and said, if the parent can't be reached, then go home. So with parent permission, if the parent cannot be reached, then curfew law is enforced and they're sent home.
Are you typically gonna take them to their doorstep or?
Typically, we make a phone call and see if the parent can come get them.
Okay.
If they can't, we would take them home.
And if they give you a bad address or say, I don't wanna go home, they gotta go to jail?
No, it wouldn't be jail, it'd be a youth receiving center.
It'd be jail for kids.
Well, not exactly. Because
They would be detained
you can't.
against their will.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, it's not even a real secure facility, now that I think about it. I was gonna say, we've had kids leave the youth receiving center. Ours is not a 24/7 out here, so you probably have to take them to Salt Lake, at which time they would continue to try to get a hold of the parents. But, that typically is not the case. I mean, the kid may misdirect you for a little while, but, and we can typically find the parents correct. We have databases and such, unless we just do not know who the kid is. That could be challenging.
Just wanna put parental consent in there and leave it up to the officer's discretion.
And the 17 age, not the 13.
Yeah, I don't want the
Like that.
tiers of the 13, just 17. And I don't want that.
So 17, move it to an infraction, exceptions to and from work or parental permission. Anything else we can think of?
Can those be written in fairly easily, John? Yeah, we're keeping it at 9 to 5.
Once we get a bakery or something where people need to be to work at 3 or 4, then might have to adjust that.
Well, it's to and from work.
Yeah, to and from work, there we go.
Okay,
Okay,
you can hear from Corey? When are we gonna hear from Corey?
Is there anything more on the city code that we need to discuss?
I just wanna say, we just did something that most governments can't do, we just compromised, so I think that's pretty awesome, but.
Well, we value what Jess thinks and his perspective, so I would never wanna say, no, we're not looking at that.
I
I
appreciate
think we
that,
should.
Scott.
I think we should look at that.
Okay, what else from the city code do we need to, because otherwise we're just gonna have a short discussion and we're gonna pass it next week or the week after.
I think we went over everything else. We're in agreement on everything else.
All right, moving along.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we bring the general plan up now. Let Chris go over that and get that out of the way so he can get on his way.
I second that.
Okay, moved and seconded that we do the general plan now. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, I do believe it's Cory that will be presenting first.
I don't care. Like, we've been working on a lot. Chris is the owner of it and author of it, but we passed it. I don't want it to be a discussion, so however you guys want to handle it, it's fine by me.
You guys tag team this if you want. If you have something that you need to add or whatever.
I'm gonna start out with this. See you, Sheriff.
I don't know, she's a little bit iffy.
You know what, before we get in the general plan, I was talking to Chris during the public comment, so I didn't get a chance to stand up. The curfew thing, I wanted to make a public comment. I think about my daughter, and if she has a curfew, she's just gonna find the next jurisdiction to go to that doesn't have one. I'd rather have her be close to home than far away, right?
She's going a long ways to find another jurisdiction. There's not one.
Yeah, well, middle of the desert or something, she could find somewhere to go. Anyways,
That's an interesting thought we hadn't discussed.
right,
Will kids just run off to somewhere?
the smart ones will. My daughter's pretty smart, right?
They're not gonna be checking.
Oh, you taught her better than that.
She's too much like me, unfortunately. Okay, general plan. There's an organization nationwide called the American Planning Association that has many members that are just like SOMAS. In Utah alone, they have 700 members. This organization puts out a publication once a month. You can think of how many organizations that goes to across the whole country. This month, they featured a general plan as a model of what to do. Guess whose it was? What? Erda City, right?
Is that right?
Demographic, they talked about zoning and how to change it for future development, and they actually used the Erda general plan land use graphic as their frontline splash page for the APA Utah site.
Great job, you guys.
Oh, awesome. So SOMAS has done a fantastic job. I almost feel bad to be here. But Chris will correct me wherever I go wrong. I brought a marker because this is 49 pages. And when I first read through it, it felt like being thrown up on, right? Like there's this here, there's this there, and there's this there. So I kind of want to explain how it's organized because it helps me get to one point. So you have your general plan, which is the whole idea. And Chris may want to talk about the whole purposes and the reasons behind having a general plan at some point. We're going to go over this. And then coming out from the general plan, you have different elements. In the one that we've proposed, there are 4 different elements. I believe that Tooele County has 7, if I'm not mistaken. These are things we can add on to later, but we have 4. The first one here is the land use element. The next one is the transportation element. The next one is the open space and recreation element. And the fourth one is conservation element, essentially. They're a little bit more long names, but that's what we're talking about. And so as we go through all the pages, the first part's going to be this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Within each one, there's like the first 2 or 3 things are items to give background, they're basically building a case for the bottom. The last thing in each section is implementation. And up here you have, basic ideas or help me with the language that it says.
Background gives like context of Erda City, what's happening currently, and then we go over best practices. There's some educational piece based on what residents and planning commission, city council have said, and the actual development, what happens. So there's some of that educational piece, and those are the basic elements that we look at. And then there's the actual element, and then the takeaways from that is the implementation.
So in a lot of the areas, thanks Chris, we spend, or they spend, or we're not going to say it, several pages explaining the best practices Somas's expertise. Sometimes there's like state law in there, educating us on why we should end up implementing the suggestion at the end. This is all in there, it's great, if you have the time to read through it. The implementation page is usually about 1 page per element, and sometimes 2. So I think what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time on each of the implementation pages, and if we have questions, we can go back to the other ones. Does that make sense, at least how it's organized?
Yes.
Questions, Scott? Scott was concerned.
No, my eyes have not glazed over yet.
Yeah, okay, I'm most, if those sunglasses come down, I'm gonna be worried.
The major difference between Tooele County's 7 elements and Erda City's 4 elements is requirements by state law. So a general plan is required by every municipality. It doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, it's required. And there's certain elements that are required. For the size of Erda, once you hit 5,000, that's when, 5,000 residents, that's when you are required to do more. But given Erda's existing size, the major thing that is required is a land use for every part of Erda City. And so that's that first element that we touch on. And then we threw in 3 other pieces to help with the transportation master plan pieces that would be required by state law on a long-term basis. Open space is something that was a big concern with a lot of residents, so we wanted to incorporate that, and then obviously conservation to preserve the historic nature and culture of the Erda City. So, all right, that's that little
I
extra.
don't apologize, it's fantastic, you don't want to put it together, you know more than me. So that being said, one of those things, thanks Chris, that's kind of the background and the help support the implementation are maps, which we spent quite a bit of time on maps. I'm going to start out on page 15.
Where did you get that map from?
Which map? The Community Service District?
The one on 15.
15. 15 comes from SOMAS. This is a community service district. This was a new concept that was explained to us. Basically, SOMAS recommended that we, and that's going to be on page 17 is the recommendation, but that we adopt some type of a service district that can be more specific in designs and things that they want inside the. Do you want to explain service districts a little bit
The
better?
white red is no longer us. Dark red is us.
So the light red is the area that would be potentially annexed in Grantsville. So that's the major difference there. As far as community service districts, there's a lot of background. As you probably know, Tooele Valley is like the referendum capital of Utah. And it has been for the last year or 2 years. And it's because people in different areas don't want what's happening elsewhere. So for example, you look at Lake Point versus Stansbury Park across the street from each other. Very different in what they want development-wise. And because of that, residents in certain areas are like, yeah, we don't want that, and others don't have the control in their own communities. And so we, with the Tooele County General Plan Update, worked through how we could best address local residents' concerns and what they were really getting at. It's not necessarily, I don't want X, Y, and Z, it's I don't want the development to kill my views or to kill whatever it might be. And so the community service districts allow residents that greater control. And that was another big issue that came from several of the residents that issued the referendum. It goes to the county council and I got no say. They just pass whatever they want. And to help residents feel like they're more involved, this community service district is a way to do that. It can be seen as another layer of government, but that's not its intent. The intent is to allow residents to actually control the way a community is developed. A community service district does not talk about density, it talks about look and feel. And so there's your distinction. Now these community service districts, again, are delineated by saying like-minded individuals is a bad way to address it, but like-minded development. So that you're matching similar development types. And a question that came up in the planning commission is, I think these are rigid, we need to have more or less or whatever it might be. The flexibility with these community service districts, as there's development pressure in certain areas, you can actually break them into other service districts to target. For example, one of the ones that came in the planning commission meeting was Oak Point. And certain ways to try and help them not want to de-annex and go somewhere else. Giving them a little bit more flexibility over their immediate area and giving them that say as opposed to the rest of the city, which may or may not agree with them. And so that's some of those pieces with that. If you have questions, feel free to ask, but it basically gives you the ability to let residents have more say in what their community looks like and feels like. It also, in a longer way, gives you some of the flexibility that the state has put on as a requirement or a disallowance to cities to allow any kind of architectural or design standards. The state has said, no, you can't do that unless it's in a development agreement. And these community service districts can be put into a development agreement. Again, the land use being based on zero density, it's all on intensity base, giving you that flexibility to adjust and negotiate with a developer coming in. So a developer has to come in to you and say, well, I want this type of density. And you can say, well, if you want that density, you have to do this and follow this community service district. That's the only way that you can control design and the style of that community.
Were you aware that the state came up with 2 separate taxing districts in Erda? They had the Erda West, that's what I was after, but that is pretty much Sheep Lane West. And then Erda itself was everything east of Sheep Lane. And so the ones that are on the Erda pay the transit tax, so they're at the 6.9. And the ones west of Sheep Lane are not required the transit tax, so they're only at a 6.3 or 6.6.
Yes, and these lines don't, the thing I don't like about delineating things, and that's what you'll sort of see in the land use code, is it doesn't give you the flexibility to adjust based on current needs. And so that taxing district, however arbitrary it is to a certain degree arbitrary. And so there are specific bounds like Sheep Lane, which, I mean, it's easy to cross, it's not that big of a road. 36 is a massive wall in your city, and so that makes a little bit more sense to break there potentially. But we were trying to find where like development would occur as opposed to roads.
So to highlight some of Chris's points, at our open house, you saw rows of stickers on there. And you had a whole bunch of people that were on the east side saying, put apartments, put industrial on the west side of Erda. And you had people on the west side of Erda putting little stickers saying, put your density, put the apartments on the east side of Erda. This breaks it up to where each area has more say in what happens in its area.
As opposed to East Erda saying, no, stick it over there, we don't want it. And them saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad that
You
Chris,
guys got me real confused now.
so we're talking about community service districts.
Is it an approving body or a recommending body?
It'd have to be a recommending body, right?
So it's just another planning commission for a smaller area.
It's, no, it goes to the same planning commission, city council, it's just an overlay district within the Erda code. So it's like a subsection with a little bit more detailed code. Right, but the community service district is the planning term for what it actually does. But yeah, essentially it's an overlay zone.
I'm glad that Chris presented this part. This was the night we voted on this, there were only 5 commissioners there, and I was the only one opposed to it. I didn't want them at all. So I'm glad that Chris could present what ended up passing. Thanks, Chris. For that reason, for John's questions, I had lots of questions about it, but I was the only one. So I think of all the changes we ended up making from the first time we talked to Chris, this is the only one I noticed just today. That green community service district was one we added on after we decided to have them for Ochre Point, because they're so much different than East Erda or West Erda. But it was supposed to be specifically around Ochre Point, not that whole block area, so I don't know if that matters much to anybody, but the recommendation came just around Ochre Point there.
This yellow spot here.
Matters to me and Kale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me and Kale are in that green.
So the recommendation from the planning commission is that community service district be just Ochre Point. We need to make that change. Chris can do it pretty easy. His software is pretty fancy. Questions about community service districts? Okay, the very next page is the land use map. This is just what we could potentially have things changed into in the future. Just 2 nights ago, we voted to accept the current Tooele County land use map, so we're not changing any zonings right now. This is just if a landowner in the future wants to change their zoning and they're requesting it, it needs to fit within this. The changes that we made, I think the initial, if anybody saw the initial point of this, there was more high intensity behind the commercial. If you see our SR 36 right there has the commercial, it's all red. Directly adjacent to that, both the east and the west side was all high intensity. And we had that all moved down to be just Ochre Point. And then low intensity east of Drew Bay, medium intensity west, and then in addition to all your commercial and employment around the airport and whatnot. I think it was a good common ground. I was lobbying in the beginning just to have 2 intensities, which would be low and medium, but the high stayed because of Ochre Point.
Question here, Ochre Point, I think this goes past Ochre Point.
I overlaid Ochre Point, the site plan that I received to try and get it to match.
Huh?
And so if it does need to shift, that's what I saw from the Ochre Point site plan. That's what it looked like, but yeah, if there's adjustments that need to be made, that's.
I think it goes farther south than Ochre Point. I think there's a block of property that's not included in that's south of Ochre Point, behind Brookfield.
There is,
We want that to be high density.
I think most of what's there is commercial. I don't know if trying to change and make a 80-acre parcel right there different makes sense.
Where's them, isn't there already approved 1 acre lots going in across south or north Erda way?
They're not gonna go in.
Not now?
That property's been put in an agricultural reserve. You're talking about the Sagers property?
Well, I thought there was like some other,
Well, there's some off Derby Road, but those would fit into this.
I thought there was like across from Church Road, remember they was gonna run Church Road?
Oh.
Build all that.
Oh, up into, yeah, but that's not part of Ochre Point. Yeah.
I was just looking at this, at the yellow part where it says.
So that yellow intensity, or the darker yellow, the middle of the 3 is medium intensity, which right now is, everything in that is 1 acre lots, some 2 acre lots, and that one subdivision, 1/2 acre lots.
So you're proposing to change the 5 acre zoning?
This has nothing to do with zoning. This is just a general plan, so if people want to change their zoning in the future, we compare it to this.
So that's what I'm saying. Well, yeah, you're right, I said that wrong. So we're approving the area where I live, the area we talked about on the Wayland property that Terry was just talking about. We're approving that to go ahead and allow changes from 5 acre zoning to 1 acre zoning.
A medium intensity, according to this map, correct.
Which would be 1 acre zoning.
That'd be for us to determine what that is. The general plan doesn't define that. I think that we've kind of tried to show what we expect, because everything else that's in that is 1.5 acres. So that's a safe assumption to make, but it's an assumption.
So I'm in sensitive lands.
Apparently, it's because you're there that they're so sensitive, Terry.
It's, are you in the south piece on the west side, that agricultural area?
Yes.
So that currently was ag land, and so it's ag/sensitive. And sensitive, if you look up on the hill, that's where the sensitive comes in, the rest is ag.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I don't understand why we need sensitive lands anywhere near central Erda.
That's agriculture.
Agriculture or sensitive lands.
Why wouldn't you have that around the middle of Erda?
Just seems like there are better uses for that land.
And agriculture?
You may have just insulted someone.
You know this field, this area,
Pretty well.
it's dry as a bone.
You're talking about, but right through the central part of Erda would include the church farm, Blake's farm.
No, I'm talking about.
South of the airport,
Talking about where?
south of the airport.
That ag land south of the airport.
Big
just-
parcel
It's like a light green
airport.
color.
And then over by Terry.
Airport is the,
The gray strip.
Yeah, so if you
Oh,
just go.
I'm just trying to
south.
envision south of the airport and I'm seeing the church farm. And
This
Walters.
this one.
so Walters
So
is
That's
all
the
here's
in
Walters,
airport.
so here's Walters' property. Oh,
There's
and this-
Walters,
yeah.
and then underneath the
Okay,
Walters.
this used to be Clegg property.
Yeah, and I don't know who owns it now, but it is.
I see.
It may include part of Bob Salt's, I don't know who owns the rest of that ground up there.
There's nothing particularly agricultural and there's nothing particularly sensitive about
I see what you mean.
that big dry as a bone field.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So, there's a fine line between a future land use plan that shows zero agriculture and shows a little bit. There was a lot more, and residents kept saying, get rid of it, get rid of it. The part that makes me nervous about removing that piece and even removing the other pieces that I already did is what is your what are you long-term wanting to establish in Erda? Do you want to get rid of all ag and so that historic nature of the community is gone?
No.
Or do you want to at least have some sort of holdouts where it actually does show that? And so that's where I have found some difficulty trying to.
All the meaningful ag is in the light yellow.
I know. And that's the difficulty. There's a lot more green.
We're saving this parcel right here because we have to save some agriculture, but it's in the wrong spot.
How long is the general plan really good for?
As long as it's valid.
That's how the next one's done.
Would you guess 10 years, 15 years?
So
years?
most go, they try and shoot for a 30-year time horizon. But the problem with a lot of general plans is they dictate exactly the zones that should go on that land. Whereas here, we're trying to be more loosely based, and that's why we use the intensity word instead of density, saying, no, this is exactly what you get, giving you the flexibility to adjust that. Now, we can get rid of that ag piece and make it yellow like everything else. But you also have to keep in mind, Tooele Valley is about the size of Salt Lake Valley. And if you look how long it took for Salt Lake Valley to develop, it was decades upon decades upon decades, whatever. Granted, there's a lot more development now and pressure now than there was then, so it won't be the same time frame. But the reason why we had more agricultural land where it actually makes sense, where there is the big pieces, is because we wanted to preserve some of that so that the nature of Erda stays what it is. And that's more the difficulty here. And I grew up in East Independence, Missouri, and for the next 7 miles up until high school was all ag land. I lived on the edge, And then we did a general plan update, and they got rid of all the ag areas, and they developed, and we lost it. Our culture and our preservation and everything's gone. And that was the difficulty that I had taking out the ag land, because of what it can do to the city. And so, maybe this piece doesn't make sense, but the other pieces that we had, the property owner said, we don't want that. We want it
Not a tree,
residential.
property that is not grass that can grow.
But that grass does grow there.
There is some grass that grows there.
I would be in favor of leaving it. I mean, I don't see growth coming there for a very long time, and
We're gonna have
if it
that
does,
Mid-Valley Highway go right.
We'll be
through it.
modifying it anyway based on population. Once we hit the magic 5,000 or more, we'll have to go.
well, that's, if someone came and said, hey, I wanna change this, we could do a general plan amendment to suit them if they wanted to change it. Those are,
That's correct. The thing that we wanted to accomplish with this general plan is that, again, like, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of acres inside of Erda. Like, there's a ton of ground, and there's no chance that this is gonna develop in 30 years. No chance, like, not even close. It's not gonna happen.
That Mid-Valley Highway in 5 to 10 years.
Parts may develop, but not the majority. You look at the size of that commercial pieces in there, and typically due to absorption numbers and other things like that, that level, if you look at 30% coverage of commercial, 1 story, you're getting a few million square feet of commercial or retail, which there's no chance that Tooele, even if it fills out the way that it does, we'll be able to absorb all that within the next 30 years. And so we were trying to do the future land use map that gives you flexibility and says, hey, there's nothing going on over here. You shouldn't put residential there. And there was a few other parcels that made sense, which were mid between 36 and Mid-Valley Connector that shouldn't be residential. And I'm saying this now to you, they shouldn't be residential, but the reason that they're being shown as residential is because property owner said, I want it residential. And who am I to say what they can do with their land? Yeah. And so that's the main reason why that stayed agriculture. Yes, it may not be worth a whatever, but it is in the fact that we're preserving some views, some openness, some semblance of what Erda is today.
I would say one of the things I've talked about is there is definitely a loud voice that is very low density in Erda. And we could talk about majority or minority, that doesn't matter. There's a loud voice out there that doesn't want any density in Erda. The best thing that can happen for that voice, if they want to win, is to build in 1 acre lots from one side to the other tomorrow. Then you'll never have higher density than that, right? And so that's one of my thoughts on why I was okay with it, because then if these landowners are asking it for it to be residential and they want to develop it, put it as medium intensity, and that voice, however loud it is or however much credibility you give them, would be satiated.
So to your point, we can make that shift and make it a residential piece.
Not residential. Well, I don't know. I just think
What's wrong with
eventually
leaving
that
it?
Mid-Valley Highway's gonna go through it and things will have to change. And
Right.
I'm okay with that.
I don't think,
Again, going back to this point, what's the distance between getting off of I-80 and hitting Tooele City? It's like 12 and a half, 13 miles. 13 miles. That's a lot of ground. So you look at Mid-Valley.
4 times today, I can tell you. It's a lot of.
Yeah, it's a lot of ground, like, it keeps going. You look at Mid-Valley, it's not a straight shot like 36 is, and you probably have 15 miles. 15 miles of development is gonna take more than this 30-year time span. And if you force development to be intensified at certain nodes and say, nope, sorry, this is ag, you can't build here, you're essentially establishing these growth boundaries where you can actually get the utilities, you can get the infrastructure, you can get all that in place and not have these little weird pockets of development where it's like, the hell are we doing over here?
It'll be changed in 10 years, I promise you.
Name.
Won't be us.
That's how I followed it.
Won't be me doing it.
A 7 to 10 year plan is kind of what I planned on this being. Obviously, Somas is in the business of doing it as often as possible to make money, so they'll tell you 2 years we need to update it.
I won't tell you that, I want this to last a while. Yeah, it sucks for me to not get that extra business, but in reality, once you hit 5,000, you're gonna have to add pieces on anyways that are required by state law.
Okay, so now that I understand these colors and what you were actually talking about, what's the process for me if I want to convince these men that there ought to be bigger areas that are sensitive?
Agriculture,
Agriculture or whatever, whether it's agriculture or whether it's big lots or.
Right now.
What's our process here if I can accomplish that?
you guys say, we can approve this with these changes, or can you go back and make these changes so that when we go before and have a recommendation to approve this or not, those are incorporated. So it's your discussion piece.
Okay, and I'm butting in here because I'm on a time schedule. Are we gonna vote on this tonight?
No.
We're gonna discuss this for some time?
We need it before July 1st,
It has to be before July 1st?
right?
Yes.
It has to be before we have a land use ordinance.
We need to lift the final piece of our moratorium, but first we
see.
promised to do that, and this is a precursor to that.
I see.
Is there something specific you're wanting to see in there, Scott?
Yeah, I would like to see exactly what you were talking about. I know all these people that have agriculture, and I'd like to see some way that there was more of that. If it says sensitive lands, that doesn't mean that it's got a fence around it and a bar on it, and there's nobody ever gonna be able to develop it, and no matter what happens, right? All it means is that, in my view, as the city goes forward, they need to pay particular attention to those properties because they're sensitive to our community. Not that they can't be changed, but there's this plan for this to be looked at more than once.
To
You
remain,
mentioned those property owners,
remain
and
agricultural.
let's say they want to retire, sell a piece of property, and in order to
Right.
do that, they need to rezone. What they're gonna do is they're gonna go before Corey with a zoning application, and Corey's gonna look down at this map and say, oh, you're on a green area. Sorry, denied.
You're on an agricultural
So-
sensitive.
But it'd come to us.
So that was my point, though. If we change it to that, that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be changed if conditions in Erda change to the point where it's not reasonable anymore. It can be changed. But what you're saying, Jess, is that by changing it to that green, it gives a future planning commission the ability to say, no, we're not changing this.
They're
But it'd
fairly
still come to
obligated
us for
say
the
no.
vote.
What?
It'd still come to us for the either approve.
We
or
can
not.
choose to pick it up, it won't automatically come to us.
If we don't recommend it, it doesn't have to go to you.
We may never even know about it.
They could appeal to you.
No, that's not the way it works. You can either give a favorable recommendation or an unfavorable recommendation. It always comes to the council.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you can run two-track, we can ask for a change in the general plan, then change so.
You can. How many people do we have online, Jen? Anyone left?
Just one other person. Margaret.
I was gonna say, is it Margaret?
Making sure I'm where I'm at.
In fact, yeah.
I'm just saying, Scott, that the planning commission, really, we should be basing our rezoning decisions on this map.
And that is very much the way it works. If something does not fit the general plan, that gives a very good reason to deny it. But Brian Walters and the White Houses and the Waylands, they all want their ground in this. A lot of people,
Oh, and the opposite, Scott, if Scott Drubay owns 1,000 acres and it's, on this, it says it's medium intensity, but you want to keep it in farmland, nobody's stopping you. You can keep it ag as long as you want.
Right, but here's the problem Tanner's gonna have, is what's moving in all around him.
Sure.
And that's what's gonna force him out. Not the fact that he wants to
Let's,
sell his property,
let's talk
but
about forcing him out. What forces him out?
Oh.
Dollars?
it happens everywhere, all over the United States.
Residents
No, I'm
surrounding
just kinda-
agricultural land
Yep.
typically make more complaints.
Because you make too much dust, is that
They,
the
they,
forcing
they
you're
complain
talking
and
about?
they file lawsuits. And even
Fine.
though there's a, say, an ag protection zone, that Tanner's still gonna have to hire a lawyer and defend himself from those lawsuits.
So you're
Um,
trying to protect the farmer that still wants to farm.
And I'm trying to protect
See, I'm
the
trying
way
to protect,
Erda is.
I'm trying to protect the farmer that wants value out of his property.
And
Right,
that's,
and I understand that, that's why Brian Walters doesn't want to paint himself into a corner. But here's the concern. If he doesn't paint himself into a corner, there's nothing to protect him from encroachment. And encroachment is what drives agriculture out more than retirement, more than financial problems. It's encroachment.
I'm with Scott. I think we need to try to protect as much agricultural land as we can.
So so that's my question is, I don't know, how do we do that? I don't know.
so, something that we touch on here, you see that last element is a conservation preservation element. And I wanted this in as an extra option of what you can still do inside of this land use plan, this future land use plan. What this conservation thing discusses is ways to preserve agricultural land by transferring density or development to other areas.
TDR.
Exactly.
Remember every word you spoke about that one night.
It's, we just finished one in Spanish Fork. There's the river bottoms, I don't know if you're familiar, it's all ag land. And the residents inside of Spanish Fork wanted to preserve it. The owners wanted to sell it, and they wanted to develop it. And so this TDR, what it allows them to do is sell their land, same value that they would have been able to develop it, but all they're selling is the development rights. And the land can stay in perpetuity as a conservation easement, which means it can't be anything but agriculture or open space. So they get the money off of selling their land, that nest egg that they're looking for, like Jess is talking about, but at the same right, it also is maintained as agricultural land. You can also do a cluster development, which allows you to box in a few homes instead of being on, let's say we have a 100-acre piece and you can get 100 units, you cluster them on quarter-acre lots, and now you save the rest of that land as open space or agricultural land that can be always
For 100
farmed.
years.
Marriott Slaterville.
to do the exact same thing that Siggers just did.
It's
Right.
it was hard for me to get, but it lets the farmer keep farming and still make that development right type money off of his
The
property.
McAllister Fund does that too, but they're having trouble getting funding for it. Did they get funding for that in Spanish Fork?
Yeah, so we develop the TDR, and what happens is a developer comes in and says, I want to intensify this area, because you have two types of zones. You have a sending zone and a receiving zone. A sending zone is the area that you want to preserve. A receiving zone are dedicated areas where there are existing utilities and infrastructure, streets and other things like that, where you can intensify it so that the development can, let's say that you got 1 acre per lot in this receiving zone, and you allow them to double it. So now you can get 2 acre, or 2 acre, 2 lots per acre. It's not a massive bump, and you can control whatever that bump is and say, in this receiving zone, you can go to 1 to 4, or 1 to 2, or 1 to 1.5, whatever you decide. But it allows you to transfer that development and still be able to sell those for actual same money as the developer would pay for that land in the first place. And the reason why this is an incentive to developers, this is one of the many reasons, but if a developer can intensify their property,
Less
and
infrastructure.
put 2 units per acre, how many roads do they still need to build? Same exact amount. They're losing money in those costs that they have to build for the street networks and everything else, utilities and all that other stuff. So they're lowering the amount of development costs that they have and maximizing the land cost, because now they can put 2 instead of 1, or 3 instead of 1, whatever you decide. That's just one of the many conservation elements that we put into this as ways to preserve this agricultural land that still fit within the land use map. So you can say, hey, I've got a donut hole out here, and all the development sort of syncs with it, and is sort of this protective wall that says, we bought in knowing that we're gonna live next to ag land, and now that agricultural person, at least for first and second generation, they know what they're getting into buying that land. And future generations, maybe it changes, but most of the time, if you know that that's a preserved land and it's gonna be agriculture forever, you're buying for that reason.
I'm very conflicted when it comes to development rights and also the preservation of the look and feel of the community in Erda. And I've struggled with it. I was looking for any sort of compromise, and let's explain this to us. It made a lot of sense to me. It seemed like a reasonable compromise between those two things.
Well, then I don't know the answer, but in that, and it's good that there's more options in that conservation plan, because I don't like the idea of me selling my development rights and dumping them on Terry's neighborhood. You know?
Right, but again, like, if his neighborhood's not where the receiving zone is, you can't dump it on.
But somebody will be in the receiving zone.
Right, and you put that where it makes sense. So we've got these intensity zones, let's say it's Poker Point, or let's say it's surrounding that north side, where you already have some existing commercial, it's abutting Stansbury Park. That makes the most sense because you're just bleeding out what current development is coming that way. But you dictate zones that make the most sense. Maybe it's out on Mountain View, Mid Valley Connector. You put your receiving zones there because that road's coming in and there's little development out that way. But you can decide where these receiving zones go because they make the most sense. And where they make the most sense is around major corridors and intersections.
So now that I've bottlenecked the whole thing,
Oh, it's good. This is where the bottleneck should happen.
dash out of here.
Thank you, Scott.
Oh, I got 2 more minutes.
So for your information, this is pretty easy for him to manipulate. So if you want to make suggestions to this council and you guys, 3 of you agree to it,
Manipulation, while we still have all 5 of us here, it was suggested that we limit Ochre Point what's it, CSD?
CSD.
It was suggested that we make the Ochre Point CSD only Ochre Point and nothing outside. And I thought, if he's gonna put in the work to make that happen, he should at least have 3 head nods before he does that, so.
Yeah, I don't want to
That's
just.
the way you said it was intended that way.
That's the way we recommended it, correct?
So you.
And you're okay?
You have my vote to do that.
As well.
And me.
You got, so go ahead and do that. You won't be wasting your time. Thank you.
So what I was saying is if you, 3 of you come to an agreement to add in some green zones, we just let Chris know, and when he has time, it's probably only 15 or 20 minutes to do it, so.
Here you go, Scott. Come here.
And to that same end, we did have green zones and property owners said we want it residential. So obviously you guys are representing your city and the property owners, and so that has to be a factor.
That's all.
That's that worse.
So,
Green? Yeah, sure. If I had some inherited property somewhere and the city council just out of the blue
put a green overlay on all my property, and that was my planned retirement. I wasn't attending every city council meeting and wasn't watching what was happening. I feel fairly harmed by this action.
And that's why I made the changes to, medium intensity.
I think you've got a lot of good compromise here. I don't necessarily have a problem with any.
But again, this is a future land use. This is what can occur. But if you put in some of these conservation pieces, it may be yellow, but it can stay green because it's been preserved in conservation.
Correct.
Now, Craig, Marriott Slaterville does this, right?
I do
Up to them.
conservation.
Yep.
Their city manager was, liked this a lot, been using it.
Yeah, it's the only way for them. No, and I agree with Scott. It's very, very hard to farm around houses. Their garbage and bags are blowing in. You get a lot of people out there mad at night when you're there at 3 a.m.
Baling hay because the
Dust,
humidity
dirt,
is just right.
you spread manure. They're not particularly thrilled with that. I mean, but yeah, typically when they do get pushed out, it's with a paycheck. So
the other concern is once agricultural land is gone, it's gone.
it's gone. It's gone.
Places for somebody to
You
have a
just
show
planted some
calf or a
heartstrings
horse.
right there.
I grew up in the red basket.
Lots of
of
times.
US, and so it's a tough one.
Okay, the only dangling questions that out there was, Kale's about Ochre Point, high intensity area. So our recommendation was the same as what we just talked about. Not only the commercial service district, but that this map be just Ochre Point and not anything else, so. That makes sense. I don't know how much, to what Craig said, 80 acres, how much you guys care about that, but our recommendation is.
Yeah, you've got like the Pine Canyon area right there, and so limiting that high intensity to just over point, I would vote for that.
That was our recommendation, probably 3 head nods and he'll change it, so it's clearer, but.
Yeah, and I thought I had done it, but if there's specific spots that you're like, this needs to be cut back a little bit, it seems. I tried to overlay their exact plan on the land to see what it would be, and that's what we thought we did, but if there's adjustments that need to be made.
Yeah, the part I see is I know there's a big chunk of land to the south of Ochre Point.
That's still
There
Erda.
is a lot of along that highway, but I would say that should still be the commercial.
I think commercial.
No, we're not talking
Yeah.
about the commercial, we're only talking about the high intensity residential behind the commercial
Yeah,
south of Oakland Point. And I'd say we move that back to medium, where it doesn't
Go
include.
back to a medium density.
Yeah. I would say that too.
Are you clear where that's at, Chris?
I still have that laid on there, so if it shows, cut it back up, we can do that. And so that's the adjustment that you're talking about?
Yep. Yep, that's one I'm talking about. I can't see any other places, but yep, that's where I'm looking.
And then, you wanna make sure that when you're doing a CSD, it's contiguous and you're not orphaning people. So that's the only potential concern with cutting that south part out of the Ochre Point Service District. You just got this weird L shape.
Almost a complete donut around Oakland Point,
Yeah.
but trust me, it works.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, and I just wanna make sure that you guys have that and are saying, yep, this is what we want.
I think so.
Okay, moving on from the map, that's probably the hardest part, so the rest should go pretty quick.
Okay.
Just looks at me with a deadpan face like, you better be serious. So let's talk about implementation. I'm on page 17. Just quickly go through these 5 points that Chris put in here. Talked about CSD, which is number 1, and assessing them. That has to do with the CSDs as well, community service districts, that's number 2. Interesting point that I think is worth making is that these are the general plan of itself is not creating that district. We still have to do it, right? Like that's a to-do item. In the future, we have to do some ordinance or something, but this doesn't do it by itself. That makes sense. Zoning ordinance, they're suggesting 3 new zones, airport, open space, and employment use. And then on number 4, they listed a whole bunch of zones to adopt. I think I counted 53. Some of them are in there multiple times, so it's not quite that many. In our meeting this week, we went over all of them one by one, and I think we ended up with 14 that we have recommended for you guys to keep. So it'll be much simpler than this. Some of them are on either a short-term or a medium-term plan to potentially develop, but for now it's going to be 14, our recommendation. And then,
Are you adding a zone?
are we adding a zone?
Add an airport zone or something?
Not yet. I think that we're going to end up doing that. We like that idea, but we don't have an ordinance, or we need to steal it from somewhere or something. There's not one in Twila County that we can just pull over. Correct.
Chris, can you provide any resources on that?
Yeah, there's a few codes that address that.
He emailed me one just this morning, so, yeah.
Sorry, I'm stepping in the middle of something.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, no, he sent questions about the zones that we had listed there, and I sent a response to what text this for.
I'll derail this and go backwards again on the
CSDs.
Yes.
Oh, that's like 2 steps.
two pages back. Do we need to modify this map? Or could we simply say that when the city establishes them, they would be in that area?
I would recommend modifying it to match what you guys are talking about, so that when you come to the point of doing that, you don't have to adjust your general plan.
Okay. Good answer.
Jess, you asked if we created a new zone. We didn't create a new one. There was only one, maybe 2. There's only 1 or 2 that we adopted from Twila County, or that we're recommending to adopt from Twila County, that are not currently in Erda. And that may be what you're thinking of, which is a couple of commercial zones. Just, we thought it was prudent to have, so even though we don't have any right now. I'm trying to remember, there was 2 that were split votes. A10, we decided not to have.
All the commercials, 3 of the manufacturings?
Yep.
4 of the manufacturings, at least 3.
The 2 that were split votes on zones, I don't know, this isn't what I'm here to present, because that'll be a different day, but A10, there out of 7 people, 4 people wanted to not have that, and 3 people wanted to have it. And R121, Terry had a question about that, which is a half-acre lot. Basically, 4 people voted to include that, even though we don't have them yet, and 3 voted to not include it. So that passes recommended. Questions on that implementation? We'll have more on the zones later. That's going to be a different night and a different land use ordinance adoption. Okay, we're to the transportation element. I'm going to skip to the implementation phase. I don't think there's anything maps-wise or anything in there that's super. Feel free to peruse it. It's important. I'm glad that Chris put it in there. I think that in the sake of time, we can just go to implementation.
Just one side point, page 20 and 21 show recommended street sections. And that's what I previously talked about, the transportation master plan. This sort of implements some of that, so that when somebody's coming in to develop a street section, you have street sections and say, this is what we would recommend.
Love it. Thanks, Chris. And that's, since he said 2021, 21 is where implementation starts. It just gives lots of ideas of make sure to have your half-mile grid pattern, a couple of extending roads like Drew Bay Road, Bates Canyon, going west, Village Boulevard, to continue all the way to the Mid-Valley Highway, 1200 West, Church Road. Try to not have too many cul-de-sacs, no private or gated streets, if at all possible. So just good ideas to help traffic keep moving. And trails is on page 23, some active transportation, so biking and things like that. Then open space, moving over a bubble on that sign there, implementation for that is on page 32. And it's just saying to preserve planned trails and add multi-use paths and keep open space and recreation. Pretty standard. I think the only thing that we really changed on, there's a map for that on page 33 with trails and ideas. We just made sure to include Rabbit Lane, which wasn't there before. That was a change he made. And continued it down Liddell, correct. And then, sorry, I should ask for questions. Told you this would be the easy part. Questions on those two? Okay, and then Conservancy is page 39. There's the implementation suggestions there. The land conservation, the TDRs that Scott and Jess and Chris were talking about is in number 1. That's one part of number 1. Talking about a Unified Tooele County Water Council in number 2, which doesn't exist yet, or it does?
It does not exist. That was a recommendation we made to Will County. There's, what, 9 different improvement districts, and none of them talk to each other.
So the idea there is to develop something, right, to conserve water. Water-wise landscape standards, we could adopt incentives to reuse water, meters on any new developments, and a water conservation plan. That's it. That's the plan that is making national headlines with the American Planning Association. Questions, concerns, anything you want to hear on what the Planning Commission discussed?
Chris, you've been wonderful to work with on this. Thank you so much.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Yes. Done a great job with it.
Scott's got me all bothered about farming to residential. Is there anything we can do with our ordinances, our zoning, to remove the ability to have any sort of meaningful claim that a resident might sue the farmer for doing the same things him and his family have been doing for 100 years before the subdivision moved in?
Some of them are already protected by state law.
If there is anything more to do, we should talk about maybe implementing.
The land use element we tried to develop to allow you to, when a developer comes in and says, this is what I want to do, I don't care what it is, it needs to match existing development. And if agriculture is next to them, they need to step the intensities towards that to try and help.
But let's say that system fails. Now, a subdivision gets put in next to a field that gets plowed twice a year, disked twice a year,
Yeah.
dust twice a year. Is there anything we can do to make it very difficult for that farmer to get sued over the dust and the noise?
They'll probably get sued.
Is there anything we can do to protect them so that he can show the judge, I'm within compliance here and
Yeah, ordinances don't necessarily control it.
that's true.
But yeah, in Harriman, we had you move it to the country concept and, yeah.
I'd love to have a you're moving to Erda concept, whatever that means.
Yeah, well, you move it to where the cows smell, sorry.
The wind blows, it's all right. Just because you have a fence doesn't mean you're not going to smell it.
It turned out that it's not a code violation. Doesn't necessarily help from other issues. It's not a code violation, that's stinking cows, because you moved the stinking cows. not a code violation for dust, because you move where dust.
Yeah,
So there are ordinances of operation hours, and I think that's, if you are to do an ordinance, you can have that as a known ordinance saying, hey, if you're doing agricultural farming related.
surely agricultural zoning is exempt from operation hours, right?
From, all production agriculture is exempt from operation of hours. But there are things we can put in there to, if we want to make an agricultural protection ordinance, we certainly could do some things
Okay.
there.
After we get through this and we've moved to meetings every other week, things have calmed down, just hammer on some stuff like that. That'd be fun.
I agree.
Make a note and remind us.
Oh, we will. Me and Scott, we're like this.
I just remembered one thing about, I think it was a general plan that Craig and I talked about on Tuesday. Chris, maybe can, it was a general plan, right? That doesn't obligate us to accept a zoning.
Oh, yes, that wording,
Is there a wording in there that already says that somewhere?
The ordinance that adopts it will have that.
Okay, that's,
there's no obligation or
It's not
right
mandatory.
to a rezone.
Yeah, if there was this map would be a zoning map, right?
right.
It's a future land use. So, yeah, that's already sort of baked into what a general plan is, but in your adoption, you can put that language in. Yeah, to make it more clear.
Even if you meet the criteria for this, you may not make it. There's no presumption of a,
And Jess is concerned about ag, and let me remember that, because if you get somebody in the middle of 4 farms that just wants 1 row of houses, even though it's on their general plan, planning commission might say, well,
Doesn't make sense for this area.
Yeah.
You might consider it TDR.
you might consider it TDR.
All right. Should we move on? So you're up next, Terry. We sort of covered a little bit, but the
I can give
the
the
time is
gist.
yours.
Got deposited today $5,811.44 from building permits, which gives us a balance right now of $28,908.41 that we have in the bank from building permits. Of course, that's gonna fluctuate because in the next week we'll get a bill from Enzyme that'll take a lot of that out.
It'll be interesting to see at the end of this first 6 months, how much we've collected versus how much we've paid in.
We're already at the 40,000 mark right now that we've taken in, and what we have paid out, we still have 28, so.
If we end up being real high, I'd like to suggest that we modify our fee schedule accordingly.
Well, like I said, we don't know how much, he's been kind of taking it easy on us as we was going and not charging the full
I
deal,
see what
so.
you're saying.
a lot of
I'm not saying the hammer's gonna come down soon, but that's a possibility.
it's coming down. And the reason is, you get a building permit, you pay your fee, everything up front. They do the review, but your building inspections, everything else, that's all down the road.
Down the road, that's
I mean,
right.
it's gonna take you 8 months to build your house, and we're gonna be getting
So
billed
that may
for
be
it.
something we don't evaluate this time, maybe next June.
It's something we wanna watch, and it should start to even out somewhere, but yes, we're up front in it right now and looking pretty good, but.
Oh, we were still kind of behind too, because at the beginning, he wasn't charging us for a lot of the stuff, because they have to go out and see the site to do that before they grant the building permit. So a lot of that upfront stuff wasn't being charged to us.
I
He
see.
was taking it easy on us, and now he's starting to kind of go with the
Do what
flow
you ought to
more.
be doing.
Right.
Okay.
So then also, our PTIF account, we got $287.12 in reinvestment, they call it. I guess it's interest rate or something like that. So for that one, we are now at for ending in May, $446,413.24. And then I actually wrote no checks this week, so we've gotten that, but we do have some hanging on the ledges. We got $2,096.40 for the League of Cities and Towns. It's due July 1st. And we also have the 2,750 that will be due the Civic Review people. So those two I know are there. We just haven't done them yet. And then the other thing I wanted to cover, because we said we would have a auditor selected by the end of the month. And the finance committee, which is Scott and I, recommended Larson and Company out of Spanish Fork, and we talked to our accountant about them, or gave him all three, and asked him who he would suggest or prefer or whatever, and he recommended them as well. So I think as a thing, we want to recommend that the Larson and Company be awarded the thing for an auditor.
Do we need to draw up an agreement, or?
You notified them?
I haven't notified anybody yet. We haven't made the selection yet.
Okay.
It takes us to
Right.
pick, so I'm just saying this is who we recommended and went through the deals, and it's up to, and then we'll be telling the other two, thanks for applying,
Yeah,
but
if you get 3 votes, ask them to do an engagement letter, send it to me.
We just authorize the chair, with your consent, to execute a contract. So moved.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we authorize the chair to execute this agreement. Is there any further discussion
that's for Larson and Company.
for Larson and Company? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Craig Smith?
Yes.
Jess votes yes. Cale?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes,
All right.
Scott was yes before he left, that's what I asked him.
Well, we know we have at least 4 votes, so that passes, and we'll go ahead and get that done.
And then, like I says, for the budget, I'm gonna kind of redneck it up for us and put it down like in that old format, and then send it out to everybody and have them kind of put in so we can get busy with
I'd
it.
appreciate that, because I can't hardly read Dave's budget.
Welcome to my world.
Need a degree to read that one.
And he says it's what the state requires, and it makes 0 sense to me, the way it's done.
We're on this killing time, and I wouldn't really want to implement this till after the end of this month, and I want Terry's opinion on it. Would we be better to do the treasurer's report once a month, and you could just give us a sheet with everything on it? Or do you feel better doing it every week?
I just soon do it every week, so then everybody knows exactly where the books are, what's going on, and what checks I've written, and then also then, if somebody has a problem with something that's brought up then instead of down the road.
Being that we're a new city, a lot of citizens have expressed interest in hearing it.
Yeah.
So,
And when we get the website, that might be a different thing, we can publicize something down
I'll
there.
plug this one more time. Starting around July, I'd like to start every 2 weeks, if we can manage it.
Well, good. Get a few things under our belt, and
We may have to do some business meetings, work meetings, depends on what's coming up.
Even if we precede our meeting with the work meeting, that would be good, but.
We got a lot of crunching we're doing this next month or two.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know if July 1st is realistic or not, but maybe the middle of July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, does that sum up treasury report?
Dipper.
We want to just, is there anything we want to try to cover on the 2023 budget? Or did you pretty much say what you wanted?
Like I says, I just think we'll come out with a thing and send it around, have everybody do it, and then get with the.
I just want to, I want to look closely at the IT portion, just to take a selfish moment here. We're adding website maintenance costs and an annual subscription to Civic Review.
Right. The only thing I want to bring to everybody's appointment was with this being in our infancy, we should look at need as much as want. Can I do this without that? Or is it gonna slow me down? Or am I doing this just to speed up the process or, something? Right now, we need more of need instead of want.
So that's fair. Okay, roads, economic development, IT, office space,
Nothing new on any of those.
council representative reports.
The roads, Scott and I got that meeting tomorrow morning, so we'll have something next
You're
week.
meeting with,
UDOT in Salt Lake,
okay,
Twilla County, Weber County, and some other county. It's a big meeting tomorrow in Salt Lake. So.
Regional transportation.
council representative reports. General comments.
I just got kind of one. Cal gets hit on a lot, being a young kid and catches a lot of grief.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a different kind.
I just think, I'd like to people giving props for, how many of us at age 21, 22 decide, you know what I want to do? I want to do my civic duty and help my community and help build it and do stuff like that at that young age. For a person that young to come out and say, no, this is what I want to do instead of all these other things that probably most of us did at that age. I think it's remarkable, and I just want to give him props.
Thank you.
When I think of myself at that age, I think about the sacrifice that Cale decided to make himself. I have much the same sentiment.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you,
really
Cal.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Second?
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Pretty much hammered my little box of chocolates.
That's my dinner.
Not having eaten all
I'm a
afternoon,
little
all
wired.
day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Like a box of chocolate.
Just throwing weird things at me. At least he didn't call me a Nazi tonight.
We got close, Craig.